Now, the business of building, and this is just a recap and a little bit of
Mhm.
additional from last time, as contractors navigate these different stages of growth, which are pretty much tripling of size each
Right.
stage, they're delivering more projects to customers each year. They're building larger and more complex projects. Every contractor has been through this to some degree, and then with that, with one and two comes that they require progressively more support systems. That those supporting operations, a more complex talent value stream. I was reminded of this, yesterday with a client because we went from 2014 and going, I think we're good with all the people. We just need a little bit of tune up and a little bit of organization. Okay, cool. And then all of a sudden we got into it and we started realizing, like, okay, wow, we need to upgrade our talent a little bit. Not that the existing talent wasn't great and wasn't doing well for where the company was at, but they were going through this stage three around 50-ish people up to the stage four of 150 people, and they just needed some additional people that had seen that stage of the mountain, including finance and operations and estimating. And so we got there, and now they're at this stage, and they're kind of going from stage four to stage five, and so they're now biting off this step of intentionally setting up in that, and you'll get into this in that recruit to hire piece. We've now hired somebody dedicated to that. We've hired an internal recruiter, and just like all new hires, new role coming in, we completely messed up the first hire. We didn't know how to manage the person, all of those things, and we go through and we learn that process, and now it's clicking really, really well. So now we definitely have what I would say is we have a pretty clear path now to stage five, and just with the market opportunities where the rest of the team's at. So that you really gets down to different project sizes and project types. So for instance, in stage one, you're probably doing some small, you're working at the mall, a stage one contractor with 5 employees, you're doing some residential stuff. You might be working at a strip mall doing some small TI things. You're doing what you can, and that is beautiful work. And then you get up in stage three, you're building a little bit larger projects. Stage six plus, you're getting involved as a hospital is looking at building a whole new campus. You're getting involved very early in the design stages, and you're working at the programming phases, and you're working there. And you might have a superintendent that is on that project that literally retires on that project that may have been out there 15 or 20 years. I know there's a hospital site up here a couple hours from here. A friend of mine, is on that project, and yeah, the superintendent, he's excited. He's like, one more tower and I'm out of here. I'm off to my retirement masterpiece. So, and with those different kind of stages of growth and different types of projects, standards change. And why we're talking about standards is because ultimately with the talent value stream, you are hiring people that can go perform to these standards. And so standards for performance that support these strategies, they also evolve with the stages of growth. And that, I know you're going to talk a lot more about the consistency, but consistent outcomes on projects for the project's employees and owners is really
Mhm.
critical. So we're going to touch on like 6 stages of standards. And first one just being subjective judgment. This is where every standard starts, and there is zero wrong with subjective judgment. That is, like, Sue, you looking at something I'm doing and saying thumbs up or thumbs down. The only thing that becomes a challenge with that is if you're letting a lot of emotion, say for instance, get into it, and one day I do this thing and it's thumbs up, and the next day I do the same exact thing and you're like thumbs down. The third day I do the same exact thing and you're thumbs up. And if it's feeling that way to me, then that becomes a bit of a problem. But that's really that's where all standards start. So don't feel bad if you have standards that are at that level. The next one is you start to think about metrics, but they're outcome based metrics. And again, that's where it all starts, because the outcomes, it's a series of outcomes all put together that creates the project value stream that delivers projects. Then we start to get into procedures. These are very how to type of documents. These are, keystroke level, standard operating procedures for greasing equipment or whatever it happens to be. But this is how you do these things. And the idea is that if you do these things, it's going to create these outcomes. Then you get in and you start to think about, things don't always work out exactly as planned. So there's these high-low variability ranges and everything. And you get really clear on what those variability ranges are. And then your not only your measurement but your management. You're trying to always compress them down. But I think like you described this one where somebody came to you, I think a vice president or something came to you and wanted 100%, and you're like, yeah, 100% is going to cost a lot of money, and it's probably not even possible to attain.
Right.
So it's totally okay. I mean, I can want 100%, but 100% might cost way more than the cost of redoing 2%.
Right.
So that's what you
Yeah,
always got to
there's a risk factor that people need to consider, right? If it's 100%, there's a risk of high cost in the case I was talking about, and in another case, it could be, hey, is 98% or 97%? What's the risk? What's the financial or reputation risk if it's 97%, right? So a lot of that is, not only understanding the ranges, but the things that go with that as to why that extra 1% or 2% are absolutely necessary, and making the calculation.
right. Yeah, and so that's just an evolution, because at first, you say like, here's the hard line of this is what I need for an outcome, but then here's these procedures, and I think if I do this, it all works out. Then you start to realize like, okay, there's a cost to adding on the layers of management required to get to say 100%. So maybe 98% is the right variability range. So anyways, these are just evolutions of standards. The next one comes up of realizing that we're not all really doing this alone. So the person that's say greasing the equipment and fueling and lubing the equipment, there has to be the person behind them that scheduled maybe and dispatched them out to do that, and there has to be the person behind them that ordered all the supplies and the materials to go make sure that they had everything that they needed and all the filters and everything they needed to go service the equipment. And then there's the person behind them that needed to go pay for it so that they kept shipping all those things. And you see where this whole thing's going. There's a person behind them that needed to make sure that they had the cash in the bank to be able to go pay it. And I'm kind of taking it to a ridiculous, but as the business grows, you have more and more people, so you have more and more handoffs, and the connections between people grow exponentially. When you have one person, there's 0 handoffs. 2 people, there's 1 handoff. 3 people, there's 3 handoffs. But then once you get to 4 and beyond, it starts to grow exponentially. And that's what you're really managing as you're scaling an organization is the workflow. So it's not only just the procedures, it's what do I have to do and what do I have to deliver to you so that you can do your job? When do I have to deliver it to you? And what's the feedback if it's incorrect? So that becomes our next stage.
Well, and David, one thing
And then,
the thing you
oh,
really know about workflows is, you see the connectedness when the crews don't get their checks. Right? I mean, they're not coming back if they don't get their checks. So you realize very quickly how connected all those things are.
yeah, I had somebody tell me, if you ever want to know who all your friends are, just don't pay your bills for a couple of days and everybody will start
That's
calling
right.
you. Which then gets us kind of to the management and the quality assurance and quality control feedback. And, and this is where you start to say, not only do we have the standard on how this thing is supposed to be done and the standard on how I'm supposed to hand it off to somebody else, then there's a standard on how you manage me, ensuring that I'm doing that in the right way consistently each time. And that's a whole nother ballgame. I was reminded of this a couple of weeks ago because we were at a stage where the company was breaking apart the project teams, right? So kind of between around stage 5, where now instead of just going from, oh, it's a project manager, now there's like a cast of, 4 or 5 people with very distinct roles on the projects. And they had done a great job of really defining each one of those specific tasks that person had to do and what their responsibilities were. They had the responsibility matrix. It was actually really good. What the one piece that they were missing was for instance, okay, a project engineer was responsible for ensuring that the production tracking system was accurate every week, which means they have to tie in with the foreman, with the superintendent, with the customer. They got to look at the accounting system, they got to look at change orders, they got to look at all this stuff. So they really have to pull a lot of things together, which gets into the workflow piece of it. What was totally missing, and it was really clear on the responsibility matrix, that the project manager was accountable for it and that the project engineer was directly responsible for it. Great, no problems in it. And it had all the other roles that were involved in this. So, I mean, it was beautifully laid out. what they hadn't, but they were getting inconsistent outcomes from that process. Matter of fact, what I love about superintendents is they don't mince any words. So the superintendent said, it was something like poop, but more R rated than poop, right? So what they didn't have was they had defined the accountability for the project manager, but they hadn't defined for the project manager what their operating rhythm was and what their procedure was for how they were supposed to check the project engineer, which is a learning role, how they were supposed to check to ensure that that was good. So it was, they gave the responsibility, the accountability, but they didn't give the how. And so then some of the project managers were doing a great job at it, but the ones that were doing a great job at it were primarily just double doing it because they were really good at doing it as project engineers. So they didn't never really taught how to manage. And that is, I'm hoping you talk a lot more about that because you were very, very good at that process, and partly just because of where you came from, where that was a discipline and due to size. So anyways, that's where we are at. Are you ready to dive into the talent value
Ready to
stream?
dive in.